on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on.
Hey guys, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
And you're hungover.
And I'm a little bit hungover.
We would have had this episode out on Sunday night, but Dylan had a little bit too much fun at the Super Bowl party.
Well, you know, it's the players' fault because it was a good game and the good times just kept it going.
They just kept rolling, huh?
Yes, they did.
And you were quite exuberant. I almost feel like I should have captured some video to share of you in your primed, lubricated state.
Ooh,
You were very sassy.
Oh.
And full of life.
No, well, thank you.
To the point that I had to get away from you and go to bed.
Oh, that's sweet. That's one of the sweetest things anyone's ever told me, and here it is, Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, Dylan, and happy Valentine's Day to our excellent listeners.
Yes,
we have the best folks.
We do. They are the best, the smartest. They know what real true crime is, right? And we hope everyone's having a great V-Day.
A V-Day.
Yeah. With a capital V.
Yeah, so we had a great weekend. Typically, we don't go out a whole lot, but we had like an excellent weekend, right? It was just full of celebrations.
Oh, my gosh.
Friday night, we went to a Brazilian-style steakhouse with Dylan's bestie, who happens to be like the meat man.
Yeah, he's the meatsican.
Like, if you can get that guy to eat a vegetable, it's like a victory.
You have to wrap it in meat.
Yeah, exactly. You do.
Like giving a dog some medicine.
I think Dylan got Special K to eat Brussels sprouts once, but that's only because they were like doused in bacon and bacon grease, right?
That's about it. That's about the size.
What did you think about eating the Brazilian steak, all the meats, Dylan? Because they come over with like the spits and they cut, pieces of sirloin and filet.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and you get to try all the little tidbits, right? You get to try all the different meat if you like meat. And I must say it was very good, but my tummy did hurt later.
I enjoyed the fact that they had like all-you-can-eat shrimp, like jumbo shrimp on the salad bar, and so I probably ate a pound of shrimp.
Okay.
And it was great. Then we went to a Dolly Parton themed drag show on Saturday night.
Oh, yes. Night of $1,000.
It was so fun.
It was a good show. And then we had the Super Bowl. So, whew.
Yeah. And then today's Valentine's Day. So we've had a lot of stuff happening this weekend. Hopefully your weekend was just as wonderful. I'm in a great mood today, Dylan. How about you?
I feel great.
You do?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. So we're ready to get into our case. Is that right, Dylan?
Yes, I can't wait. This is a very interesting story, and I think it will make a great case of mountain murders.
Yeah, this actually hasn't been covered by many podcasts. I think I've found one other podcast that has covered the story. And I think it's an important case to talk about, especially in the month of February, because it is Black History Month.
It is.
Charlottesville, Virginia is known for being the home of the University of Virginia and also Thomas Jefferson's sprawling estate, Monticello. The population is around 46,000 residents, and 18% of the population is Black or African American. The poverty rate is around 24.5%, with 29% of Black folks living in poverty.
Wow.
So there is a lot of hardship in this area.
Yeah, it sounds like
people of color.
Yes, unfortunately, oftentimes the poorest communities or the most underserved communities are hit the hardest. So if you do lose jobs and the economy changes in an area, they're always affected the most and first.
Well, I bring up the poverty rate because I think it is applicable to our story today, and you'll see why. So Sage Smith, she's no exception. She understood growing up in a housing project known as Garrett Square. Born December 13th, 1992, as Deshad Smith to parents Latasha Dennis and Dean Smith. After she was born, her parents split and moved on to other relationships. Dean was incarcerated on drug charges during Sage's early childhood. Extreme poverty plagued Sage's life as she lived with her paternal grandmother Cookie in the affordable housing complex. And Cookie was a prominent community leader who served on the Tenants Association and residential patrol there.
Oh, wow. So she's very active, very in tune with the community. I'm sure everybody probably knows her.
And Cookie was a tough cookie, Dylan, and a positive influence on Sage. At 12, Sage moved to the Fifeville neighborhood with her grandmother. That's when she first met Shakira Washington, who would become one of her dearest friends. Soon after Sage moved in with her birth mother, but that was brief. Her mother was eventually deemed unfit, and that's when Sage was sent to foster care. While in her teens, Sage came out as transgender, choosing to live her life as a female. Now, for Sage, who didn't like labels, she preferred being called gender fluid. But Sage was into fashion and makeup, always known to dress to impress.
So you would notice Sage walking down the street, likely.
Yes.
Okay.
Flashy clothes, really bold, very, fashion forward, funky, right? The fun makeup, hair.
Why do I feel like you and Sage would be good friends?
We might be. Her whole family suspected she was gay, but waited until Sage was comfortable enough to be open about her sexual preference. When Sage was still going by Deshad, she came to her grandmother with something to confess. She told Cookie she was gay, and Miss Cookie said, quote, "You aren't telling me anything I don't already know." Because let's face it, Granny knows, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I think that it would be I've never been in this situation, of course, and it's all a very personal situation. But I would say that would be a pretty good response to get back from your loved one. Like, I don't even think that's condescending or anything. I think it's like, I already know that, and we haven't talked about it because it doesn't matter. And I love you just the way you are, no matter how you are.
Exactly. At first, she identified only as gay, but eventually realized being a gay man didn't seem to fit either. And that's when she realized she was transgender. Now, at first, Dean, her father, didn't accept this news. He didn't want to have contact with Sage. It took one of his other children having a heart-to-heart with him, and then he watched the Lifetime movie called Prayers for Bobby that really changed his perspective. Dean had always told his children, above all else, he wanted them to be happy, with themselves especially. So he took his own advice and reached out to Sage. She'd been very sad at her father's distance, so having him back in her life was really good. It made her very happy.
Okay.
Like, she really wanted to have that strong relationship with her dad. And that's the thing about Sage. She seems to have a lot of close family ties. Dean said, quote, "When she walked by on the street and I was at the barbershop with my boys, I'd always say, 'Come here, I want you to meet my child.'" The transition was not an easy one. Sage found others were not so understanding about her sexuality. She received a lot of bullying and harassment. The misogyny, racism, and transphobia, let's face it, Dylan, it's deeply rooted in society.
It is.
In 2020, the Human Rights Campaign tracked a record number of violent fatal incidents about transgender and gender nonconforming people, and the majority were Black trans women. Black transgender people had an extremely high unemployment rate, nearly 26%, which is 2 times the rate of the overall transgender community. In a report by the National Transgender Discrimination Study, showed that 41% of Black transgender folks admitted to being homeless at some point in their life, and more than 1/5 of those surveyed were living with HIV.
Wow.
So this is a very underserved community, and
Well,
they face a lot of struggles.
yeah, and I think it's almost like they have these perceived strikes against them. So you're transgender, you're Black, you're perceived as gay by those around you, which the Black community is not all that open to being gay sometimes, and it's unfortunate, but it seems to be the case.
From education to employment and housing discrimination, from police brutality to healthcare disparities, Black transgender people are suffering at extremely high rates due to bigotry and transphobia. Now, despite this, Sage felt there wasn't only like one way to be Black. She didn't have to conform to anyone's standards of Blackness. How someone chose to express their gender, identity, race, or sexuality was personal, in her opinion.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
I agree with that as well. She was charismatic, energetic, and outgoing. Sage loved dancing and would often go to the queer club in Charlottesville. She made YouTube videos when she was in high school. Ever the dramatic free spirit, Sage would stage these Vogue-style photo shoots on the bus with her friends on public transportation. And they would be like posing, all decked out, while the other riders were just kind of like, what's going on here?
That's pretty awesome.
Sounds fun, right?
Yeah.
She also lived cautiously, knowing the dangers of being a Black trans woman. Sage never walked home alone, and she never went out with strangers.
So, on one hand, Sage is like a free spirit, live your life however you want, but at the same time, she's being realistic about protecting herself and, not maybe trying not to end up in any kind of a situation where she may get into trouble.
Well, very self-aware.
Self-aware,
and,
yeah.
A sense of observation and just having that, maybe that sense of danger in the back of your mind. And I think across the board, the majority of women feel this way.
And it's situational awareness. It's to be, aware of your surroundings and stuff. And, sometimes you see people in a parking lot, you could walk right up to them and, do anything you wanted because they're engrossed looking at their phone or fumbling in their purse or with their groceries. So, I mean, sometimes you really do. It's not a bad habit to just, glance around, have your head on a pivot.
Keep your head on a swivel, Dylan.
Keep your head on a swivel, rather.
Yeah. No, it's important. I mean, I think not only being a Black trans woman, being a woman in general, I think we all kind of have that sense of safety, security, being aware, noticing like if someone seems strange or creepy or lurky, but especially someone like Sage because she has a lot of strikes against her in our society. In 2011, Sage was the first person in her family to graduate from high school.
Well, that's a huge accomplishment.
It is. She wanted to be a cosmetologist, so she started taking classes and found work at a salon in Charlottesville where she helped clean up and, kind of completed other tasks. Maybe, did the hair wash or something like that, kind of getting the clients ready for the hairdresser.
Yeah, so she got her foot in the door and started learning the business.
Yeah, it's a great hands-on experience for her, and she loved it because, again, she's into makeup and hair and fashion, and, so this is definitely, right up her alley, and she's loving it. By 2012, Sage was living on her own. She moved into an apartment with 2 roommates, her friend Shakira and Aubrey, another friend. They called the pink apartment the Dollhouse Mansion because they had painted all of the walls pink. And most of the decor was hot pink and super girly. I envision Paris Hilton's house.
Okay.
When I've seen images of Paris Hilton, she's got all the pink everywhere. So I kind of imagine this is what the Dollhouse Mansion looked like.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's been a lot of fun evenings there in the Dollhouse Mansion. They're just hanging out, living their best life.
So this is the most girly girl apartment, turned up to 11. I love it. The trio would host parties at the apartment, which were a big hit, kind of like a sought-after invitation within their group of friends. Sometimes Sage and friends attended parties catered to men, and they would hook up for fun, sometimes for money. The men came from all walks of life, and some of them actually were married.
Oh.
They were always safe and kept in touch with each other. And as I mentioned, Sage was a really cautious friend, and I don't have the full story in my notes, but I'm just kind of recalling it. Her friend Shakira remembered a time when she had gone home with a UVA professor, and she heard something out in the bushes and like a knock on the door or in the window and was like, what's going on? And like looked and Sage was out in the bushes like, are you okay? Like she'd followed her friend home with this man just to make sure she was safe.
Right.
It's pretty funny, right?
Okay, I'm just checking on you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna go
I
now.
want a friend like that.
Yeah.
Like that's the friend I want. And everyone said Sage had a big heart and was generous. She would be walking down the streets in a mini skirt and heels, carrying a little old man's groceries for him. Sage was the protector of the friend group, always making sure everyone was safe and had what they needed. And she wouldn't allow her friends to go off alone or with strangers. And so, as I mentioned, like she even was like hiding in the bushes to make sure her friend was okay.
She's kind of like the group mom, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. It was on November 9th of 2012 that Sage changed her gender on Facebook to female and announced on social media she was transitioning. However, this news wasn't widely accepted by her circle. Someone even sent her messages saying she needed to, quote, watch her back because people had unfinished business with her.
Well, that's not weird.
Well, it seems like Sage had maybe hooked up with a man and then contacted his wife to say she had been with him.
Oh my gosh.
So people are like, you better watch out.
Well, that's you're just allowing yourself to get into someone else's mess. Whenever you have a relationship with them, you know they're married, and I don't know, it's just not good for anyone to do, because you're kind of drug into their shit. You have to deal with all their whatever's going on.
Well, and I don't know all of the details of the situation, like if she kind of had a long-term relationship with this man, and maybe he was kind of like leading her on, lying to her, and she got pissed and finally told his wife, or if there was some other circumstance. Again, I'm fuzzy on the details, but for whatever reason, this seemed to cause friction among some folks. Now, around this time, Sage was also placing casual encounters ads on Craigslist, which her friends were unsure about. Now, do you remember casual encounters on Craigslist?
I do, because actually at work, used to, we would, they had, the internet was there on the old computers before they changed everything around, and they would pull up these, and we would just read like the titles of them.
Oh, yeah.
And laugh.
So I had a friend,
Oh my
Bridget,
gosh.
and we love to read the casual encounters and the misconnections.
Yes.
And we would read them like in different voices or whatever and just be entertained for like the whole night.
Oh my gosh.
Especially the misconnections. Some of those were fucking hilarious.
Dude, I mean, it's just some of the stuff that it'd be like, I need you to do all this stuff for me. You must have a car and you have to leave by 8. I mean, it's just weird.
So before it was a banned section, for those of you who may not remember, we have some listeners who were a bit younger than us. Craigslist offered a place for people to display ads looking for casual sex and hookups. It was hugely popular because it was anonymous. Strangers from different parts of the world could meet online, and it was free.
Yeah, I mean, what more could you ask for, right?
I guess. If you're horny and looking for love, it's probably awesome, right?
Well, now this kind of a hookup would never work for me,
Yeah, I know.
and I don't know if you would be into it.
Dylan's definitely not a one-night stand kind of guy.
But some people, this would really be their thing. I mean, I guess they find it sexy, it's hot, turns them on. But I just think
I don't kink shame anyone.
No, and I'm not.
I mean, I've had friends that loved the casual encounter section.
Yeah, but the very thought of it
like
is
friends in larger cities,
Yeah.
like New York and such. Maybe not so much around where we live.
it's a horrifying thought. Just even the whole thing.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
it
scares
totally
me.
freaks me out. Like
Right.
I'm too much of a true crime encyclopedia to put myself in that kind of danger, I guess. No, it's not going to work for me. Sage's friend Shakira had started taking estrogen shots, which was something Sage looked forward to, but it was really expensive. So she was kind of hoping she was going to be able to work the cosmetology job and, try to pull funds together to start the hormone therapy. It was on November 19th. The roommates planned a birthday party for Shakira Washington. Now, the party was great. Everyone was having fun in style until a woman busted up in the apartment, threatening one of Sage's friends over a guy.
See, there you go. That's that mess that you get drug into.
Well, I mean, men ruin everything. So
and whoever lying about it. It makes it even worse. And I think that's one of the worst things that a person could do. Now, you take the scenario you were describing earlier. Been having an affair with this third party, and you've been telling them that you want to be with them, you're getting divorced, blah, blah, blah. You love them so much. It's over with your wife, and you string them along for a year and a half, or whoever knows how long. And then they turn around and tell your wife or husband or whoever that they're having this relationship with you. I don't blame those people in that situation. I think the person doing all the lying back and forth, the one in the middle, should have to answer for these things. But it just turns into such a shit show so quickly when you're in those types of situations.
So this is like a little sidebar and I guess it kind of applies to the story, but what always gets me about these situations, if there is like a person who gets busted for cheating, 9 times out of 10, their partner is going to be more upset with the other woman or the other guy than with their spouse or partner. The one that's actually in the relationship doing the cheating.
Right.
Because like this person is busting up in this party mad because one of Sage's friends has been cheating with her boyfriend. And it's like, why aren't you mad at the boyfriend?
You should be busting up wherever he's at and get answers from him, because the third party person doesn't matter. Because if your partner is willing to cheat on you, they'll find someone. So that really is almost a moot point or a part of it, because it's on them. They're the ones who made that vow to you, or you've both
the commitment,
and you've agreed to be in a monogamous relationship, and they're the one violating that. But a lot of times that anger gets deflected around,
misdirected anger,
that partner and onto the other person, and I've never understood that.
I don't understand that either, but I guess the heart is complicated.
Well, the heart wants what the heart wants, right?
Even if it's a no good, lying, cheating, cold, dead beating, 2-time double dealing, mean mistreating man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the fight made its way outdoors, and the street is lined with cars because, again, they are having this, like, party that, in the words of my teenage daughter, is bussin'.
It's a bash.
It's a bussin' party.
It would have been a bash back in our day.
It would have been a bash.
Yeah.
Totally. In the chaotic fight that was breaking out, because it sounds like the party, everybody just sort of bum rushes the outside.
Spilled out into
and
the
they're
street.
all just like a brawl is happening. Sage got into an altercation with a guy named Jamel Smith, and he's not related to her. I mean, they both have the last name Smith, just to clarify. Now, she didn't know Jamel, but had seen him around town. And when things reached a boiling point, like totally out of control, this fight, someone called the cops. The cops arrived around 11:20 p.m., and Jamel Smith filed a police report stating that Sage had damaged his vehicle, but no arrests were made. According to Shakira, fights were kind of commonplace among their circle, but something about this one felt different.
Like is maybe more serious.
Right.
Or, yeah.
Jamel Smith sent out a cryptic tweet right after that said, "Been disrespected to the point of no return."
Okay. Yeah, and once you reach that point with your Twitter characters, there's really no way back.
When Shakira didn't intervene on Sage's behalf during the fight, this caused friction between the pair. Sage was disappointed in her that her best friend didn't have her back. But Shakira's kind of like, bitch, I ain't trying to get in the middle of this.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess it depends on what you have all these people. I could imagine the scene.
I mean, it's Shakira's birthday.
Yeah,
she's not trying. She's probably like looking hot and got some cute outfit. She's not trying to break a nail and get in a fight. I wouldn't be either. This
chaotic scene. No real resolutions coming of it. Nothing's getting worked out. It's just a mess, and people misunderstanding each other. People screaming and hollering. I mean, it's just a mess.
After the cops showed up and then left, the friends had a heated exchange in which Sage told Shakira, quote, "I hate you." And Shakira had friends from Norfolk come and pick her up. Because she was pretty upset. They have to live in this shared space together. Sage is very angry and tells her, "I hate you." And Shakira's like, dude, it's my birthday. So
She just clears out.
she's like, I'm leaving, right? So she heads down to the coast to cool off. She's going to give Sage some space, a few days, and hoping, by the time she comes home, maybe things will, kind of be back to normal.
And that was probably a smart move. Remove yourself from the situation, get some space. Yeah.
The following day was November 20th, and by all accounts, Sage woke up late. By afternoon, she phoned her dad, Dean, and asked if she could borrow some money because she wanted to get her hair braided. She also congratulated him on his anniversary of being released from prison. Sage then woke up her friend Aubrey, who was still sleeping, also a roommate, and Sage told him she was going to go meet a man. Now, Aubrey didn't wake up until around 8 p.m., discovering the apartment was dark, empty, and Sage hadn't come home yet. Aubrey called Sage's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Now, Sage was known to charge her phone anywhere she could find an outlet. So this lack of cell phone didn't make sense to Aubrey.
So very seldom she was caught with a dead phone battery.
Exactly. This was her lifeline. The next morning, Sage was still not back. That's when Aubrey grew increasingly concerned about his friend and called Shakira at the beach down in Norfolk, down in the Hampton Roads area. Now, Shakira thought at first it was Sage calling to apologize, but learned her friend was missing. Shakira told Aubrey to immediately phone Miss Cookie, Sage's grandmother. Well, when Aubrey calls Miss Cookie, Sage's grandmother is like, call the police now.
Oh, wow.
Something's not right. This is not Sage. This is not behavior this is not like her.
She doesn't go this long without being in communication with someone.
No, and never missing overnight, always telling people where she is, the lack of cell phone. I mean, all of this is very concerning for Miss Cookie. I mean, she knows her granddaughter and knows this is not right. Just got that gut feeling. Miss Cookie felt Sage would never leave her family without warning, especially right before Thanksgiving. She had plans to spend the holiday with her mother. So Miss Cookie felt something was off and someone had taken Sage.
Oh, my gosh.
That was her first instinct. November 21st, Aubrey phoned police. It seemed the Charlottesville police didn't take the missing persons report too seriously, as we've heard time and time again, Dylan.
Yeah, we have heard that in so many stories and seen so many cases, and they just, for whatever reason, and they just don't want. I mean, they basically say we can't or won't do anything, And it just drives me crazy because that's the problem. That's the most important time when someone first goes missing. The first couple of days are so important on finding that stranger who saw something, or saw them getting in a car with someone. Or sometimes people see information that's important and they don't even know it's important because they just happen to catch a glance of it, and it's people they don't know. But that's what getting out in the area, beating the streets, asking questions, interviewing people, that's where you get those answers from.
Getting the information to media right away. A photo, the information. That way folks can call in tips. Well, the police asked for Sage's name, birthday, and a photo. And it wasn't until the following day, Thanksgiving, that they began looking into Sage's disappearance. So at this point, we have some days passed. And in a missing persons case, Dylan, we know the first couple of days are critical, as you mentioned. The witnesses, people forget. They might forget the description of if they saw Sage with someone, they may have forgotten what that person looked like, what kind of car that person might have been driving. I mean, all of those things.
Well, if I see someone, some random people in a parking lot having a heated conversation in a convenience store parking lot or something like that, you're not going to remember that for the rest of your life. But for a couple of days, you'll be like, yeah, man, I saw these people. They were kind of, I couldn't tell. I think they were arguing and blah, 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 So, yeah, that's the types of things people forget.
Sage's parents explained it was unlike their daughter to have a phone, go to voicemail, or be out of touch with family or friends. She never went more than a few hours without speaking to her people. Detectives learned from a friend that Sage had been seen around 6:30 p.m. on November 20th, the night she had left to go, quote, meet this man. And she was walking west on Main Street. The friend said, I chatted briefly with Sage, and she confided she was on her way to meet a man. Now, Aubrey Carson, who called in the report, went to stay with his grandmother about 20 minutes north of the city after Sage went missing. And when detectives asked him to come down for an interview, he agreed to the interview but explained he didn't have a car. And he asked if someone from the police department could come pick him up and bring him to the station for an interview. And they never did. He wasn't interviewed until like 2 weeks later.
What the hell?
Sage's family were outspoken critics of the investigation from the beginning, and we'll get to more on that later. 6 officers conducted a grid search of the busy area, checking dumpsters, alleys, open lots, parking lots, and any fields or drainage ditches for signs of Sage, as well as like checking nearby businesses, hoping that maybe someone had security footage from cameras along the way that might have picked up Sage walking, maybe with some person of interest, right? Unfortunately, the only camera in the area was a traffic cam, which only monitors but does not record.
Ah, what the hell? Oh, is that so they can look at live feed for some reason? Because I just couldn't imagine why else it would be there if it's not making, if it's not recording the information.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay.
And the government. If it's back ass words, they're gonna do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people don't realize how many cameras, even more so in European countries, a lot more so. But how many cameras we do pass when you're just driving down the road or walking down a sidewalk. Every ATM, a lot of stores have, cameras right there in front of the stores.
Now the houses all have Ring cameras, it seems
yeah.
like. A lot of home security cameras.
Definitely.
The
so
Nest.
That's a good thing in a way. But, when
But it's Big Brother.
When Big Brother kicks in, we're all done for.
With little to no information, detectives subpoenaed Sage's cell phone records after 72 hours. Now, Sage had spoken for about 20 minutes with a friend in Northern Virginia on the day of her disappearance, but phone calls ended around 6:36 p.m. when Sage had a call from an unidentified number. Sage's family had no idea who this number belonged to. So Dean decided to take action. He wanted to find his daughter, like any concerned father.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
He posted the number on Facebook and asked if anyone could identify the number or knew the person, who owns this phone number, basically. Fairly quickly, a trans woman named Yami Ortiz recognized the number and passed on the information that it belonged to a man named Eric McFadden.
See, that's pretty wild. He just does that one thing, puts on social media, and fairly quickly has an answer back. That's pretty interesting.
Well, I guess that's the upside of social media is that it can help with things like this.
Crowdsourcing for any reason to help in the community or help a loved one or whatever is really the bright spot of social media in my book. You see so many heartwarming stories, people coming together, regular people financing things, some things that cost millions of dollars. But that's the only bright spot, I think. The rest of it's a shit show. Sorry.
The record showed Eric and Sage had exchanged multiple texts and calls for weeks leading up to Sage's disappearance. By the way, I apologize. I'm a little stuffy today, so I feel like you're hearing me, and I apologize for that.
Oh, they're hearing you.
Yeah.
They're listening to us.
You're hearing me all stuffed up.
You're like one of them old turkeys at Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Okay. So the pair met several times for sex, and it seemed Sage was blackmailing Eric.
Oh, no.
He had paid her money so she would keep quiet about their encounters because he had a girlfriend.
See, actively, like I'm telling you because you've been lying to me. That's one thing. You deserve to be told on and your world blow up and everything be shitty for you. But now we're entering off into something that is quite a bit more serious, I think.
Well,
once you cross that line of full-on blackmail, you give me money or I will do X, Y, Z. I don't know. It's not good.
Okay, so here are my thoughts on this, Dylan. One, I'm not trying to victim blame Sage by any stretch, but this is like playing with fire.
Well, exactly.
Blackmailing someone, regardless of what. I mean, that's just kind of putting yourself in danger, right? But I also understand that Sage was living in poverty, very poor, not a lot of prospects. There is a big unemployment rate in Charlottesville. There's a lot of racism there. I mean, we all know what happened in Charlottesville, 2 years ago? So here's Sage struggling, trying to make ends meet, trying to be able to afford this hormone replacement therapies, like all the things that she needed to get where she needed to be. And sometimes when people are in desperate situations, they do desperate things.
Yeah, and I think that's a good you bringing up the poverty and describing kind of the economic workings of the area. Kind of, yeah. Unfortunately, this is where you could end up, but it still doesn't change the
It
fact
doesn't make it
that
right
it's a very dangerous
or
situation.
okay.
Right.
But I'm just saying, I guess I can kind of see the situation. I always try to see situations from different points of view.
Right.
And so I can understand maybe where Sage was coming from, the motivation or the reason why, right? But it doesn't negate the fact that, this is dangerous. This would be dangerous for anyone.
In any form or fact, no matter what you're blackmailing that person about.
Because extortion is it's probably not ever going to work out for you.
If you're putting someone putting them in a desperate situation. Whether it's they're going to lose their family, whether it's something over business, a large amount of money, whatever it may be, you're I don't know, you're just changing the dynamics of everything, and it's just it's like everything gets dialed up a notch.
Well, Dean didn't trust police. Remember, he had been in prison. He had had run-ins with Charlottesville police, and he was known to them. So he's immediately like, I don't trust them. They're not doing enough to find my daughter. He jumps into action and becomes a bit of a detective himself.
So he has this number. He's quickly identified it on social media. Feels like he has good information, and he's going to move forward with that.
Yeah, so he starts playing detective. He looks into Eric McFadden, learns that the man works at a Sherwin-Williams paint store, resided in Charlottesville with a girlfriend, found some of his social media profiles, people who knew him, asking around about him. Dean decided to post the man's picture on Facebook.
Really?
On Saturday, November 24th, a missing persons report came in from a woman named Esther Ayeni. She was the girlfriend of McFadden, and she said he had not shown up for work or at home for several days.
Oh, no.
Charlottesville police inform her that Eric is actually a person of interest in a missing persons case.
Now, see, so she contacted them to say, hey, I can't find my boyfriend, basically.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, by the way, we're looking for him as well because he's a person of interest in a missing persons case.
Yes.
Now, what would that make you think if you were McFadden's girlfriend?
Concerned?
Would you be like, what the hell's going on?
Yes.
And now I'm really, really, really worried.
Okay, so when police spoke with Ayeni, who was out of town for Thanksgiving, it was a Monday. She admitted that she had gotten some calls and emails from Eric. So imagine this. She goes out of town for Thanksgiving with her family, and her boyfriend's staying home at the apartment. She comes back. He's gone. No trace of him.
Oh, my gosh.
She finally does start getting some communications from Eric. He was in Washington, D.C. and needed money. When she spoke to Eric, she explained the police wanted to speak with him. Esther Ayeni then gave him contact information for reaching the detectives. At Esther's apartment, police did a search of McFadden's belongings. He had left behind a laptop and some clothes. There was a CVS receipt showing that he had been in town as recently as November 22nd, which was 2 days after Sage vanished. Sage was missing for 1 week when detectives got a phone call from McFadden. He explained, yes, he was supposed to meet Sage near the Amtrak station, but she didn't show up. He didn't know what had happened to her. He also told them he was in New York City, and when detectives asked, why are you in New York? His answer was simple, Dylan. I've never been to New York City.
Well, I mean, I guess it's possible that he'd been wanting to visit New York, and it just happened to happen at this time. Happened when this situation with Sage has happened. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I'm the cops, I'm still not
It's suspicious, Dylan.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to mark you off the list yet, bud.
The detective told McFadden to return to Charlottesville so they could speak in person, and Eric hung up. So, not fully cooperating with detectives at this point. On Wednesday, November 28th, another search was organized. Law enforcement combed the streets and wooded areas along the West Main Street route where Sage was last known to be. They expanded the search to include the area where McFadden was living with his girlfriend, but they didn't find anything. Esther Ianni contacted police on Thursday with the news that Eric planned to take a bus to Charlottesville and he would be arriving on Friday night. However, he never showed up.
Wow.
By now, detectives had looked into the trash pickup for this area and learned it was taken to a landfill nearly an hour away in Henrico County. Another blow to the case came when Esther Ianni told law enforcement that Eric was planning to run. So he emailed his girlfriend from New York saying that he was being blackmailed by Sage. He also went on to say he'd never had sex with Sage, but she did have many enemies. And according to McFadden's email, he had met up with Sage, but then some other people showed up, and he just kept walking and didn't look back.
So that evening, he did make contact with her when he told police he was supposed to meet her?
This is what he's saying. But then
Okay.
some other people showed up, and he took off walking and didn't look back.
Well, see, here's the thing.
Suggesting that perhaps these other people had, bad intentions.
Where's the thing? Why wouldn't you just relay that information to the police? Because you meeting her, there's nothing wrong there. You got you two already know each other, so that's not totally outside. You even have this relationship of sorts, so that's not that's not criminal for you to have met her, and you should relay this information to the police quickly, and you could give a description of these other people quotations. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I buy this shit.
I'm sorry, Rufus is barking, and I'm not sure if our listeners can hear him. But anyway, Rufus says hi. He just wants to be part of the podcast. Apologies for that.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so as we know, McFadden admitted that he did meet up with Sage. Police use this information to obtain warrants for his computer, email, cell phone, and social media, as well as bank records. He last sent his girlfriend an email in May of 2013 from an untraceable email, but has disappeared since. And we'll get more into Eric's disappearance in a few minutes.
Oh my gosh.
By December, police have brought in cadaver dogs from a search and rescue group to comb the area where Sage was last seen, as well as near McFadden's apartment. Now, the dogs also searched along the railroad tracks and a nearby pond. A dog did make a slight indication near the pond of Sage's scent, and a dive team was sent in to search the pond, but they came up with nothing.
Man, some of the lengths they go to when they're searching for people, sometimes it's amazing.
Then a search of the landfill was all that was left. Charlottesville police and officers from Henrico County conducted the search. An expert, a retired special agent who specialized in landfill searches, was brought in to oversee the venture. Dressed out in hazmat suits, the officer spent hours looking for Sage, yet there was no sign of the missing woman. But searching an entire landfill? I mean, I'm sure they have certain areas where they're like, we know this is the trash from this county, this area is being dumped.
Right.
But you're talking acres.
Well, it's typically
and tons of trash.
laid out, and this really blows my mind when they actually search the contents of the landfill. Yeah, they'll be laid out in a grid. They'll have a general idea of where that trash in that day or week went, but still, like you said, it's just the volume of all the trash from all around the area being piled into this one place and just mixed up.
I mean, it could take weeks
oh my
or
gosh.
months
And
to do a proper search.
Instead, you can't just rip through. You have to carefully kind of go through it because you're obviously searching for it's an recovery effort for someone's body. So you have to be careful as you move all the stuff around. So, yeah, I don't even know how I would not want to be part of one of these searches because the landfill's gross and it stinks. I mean, I'm just going to put that out there.
A few tips came in that Sage was living in the Tidewater area of Virginia or had gone to the Carolinas. Yet none of that information panned out. Detectives did consult with agents from the FBI and U.S. Marshals to see if they could assist in some way. Sage's information was admitted to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 2013. Her dental records were added to a national registry. In 2015, Charlottesville police announced they no longer felt Eric McFadden was a suspect. According to them, he had no means of getting rid of a body. Eric didn't own a car. He lived in a suite with other people. He stayed in town 3 days after Sage went missing, only seeming to get spooked when his photo was posted on Facebook by Sage's father.
So, okay, well, I mean, his behavior was a bit odd, but I guess all that would be a lot. Maybe you would just be like, look, I didn't have anything to do with this, but, the fact that Sage was possibly blackmailing me and all this doesn't look good. I don't want to get caught up in this. I don't have money for lawyers, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just going to kind of get scarce. But, that's kind of weird to me. I mean, it makes you look guilty?
Yeah. You think?
So, I don't know quite how to read that.
Dean Smith and Miss Cookie see the investigation as completely botched. When a white college student named Hannah Graham went missing on September 13th of 2014, the Charlottesville police launched a huge investigation and costly search efforts. Dean Smith was angry when he saw drones, helicopters, and all the media attention to find Hannah. He was like, why didn't they do this for my child?
I would be pissed off too, honestly.
Now, to be fair, because at first I was like, what the fuck? But then, I try to see points of view. So to be fair, detectives pointed out that they had Hannah Graham on video leaving the Tempo restaurant where she was last seen with a man named Jesse Matthews. So on this video, she appears drunk. Investigators point out there is no standard protocol for a missing persons case, and with the Hannah Graham case, they had clear evidence of her leaving with a man. So they had some lead.
So basically they're saying is they were investigating the evidence at hand and that each case is different. Therefore, so their reaction is going to be different to every case, right? I mean, it's depending on what they have to work with. I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense to a degree. But, it sounds like some rather different... it's hard to judge something like this. I would understand if I was Sage's family member. I would understand feeling the same way, whether I was right to feel that way or not. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
You want what's best for your kids. You're going to want your child. You're going to want them to do everything they can to pull out all stops to find your kid.
Right, and they just had been looking for your child, and now they're looking for someone else's child, and you see all this equipment and stuff, and it's like a big hurrah. And then if it's all over the media. I don't know. I get what the investigators are saying, but at the same time, why didn't my daughter's case get this kind of attention?
Officers or detectives also mentioned, they didn't really have any evidence in the Sage Smith case and didn't know for sure she was abducted. According to one of the detectives, facts dictate your actions as an investigator. Charlottesville gets a missing persons case nearly every other day. Not to mention that Charlottesville is a hub for Virginia's youth, like the detention proceedings. Juveniles and young people run away from these detention homes all the time, and they usually show up within a few hours. So they're they have an alarming number of missing persons and juvenile runaways cases in Charlottesville.
So almost like they have like this perfect storm of the frequently having missing people who 99% of the time turn back up.
Right. And I understand. As a family, you want results, not excuses.
Right.
But I think you also have to pause for a moment and kind of take some of these factors into consideration.
Well, it's realistic. You have to be realistic about it. Excuse me, my mic fell into my face.
Well, and I believe, and we may cover the Hannah Graham case because it is pretty fascinating. If I recall, I think Jesse Matthews may have been a registered or convicted sex offender. And so that could have also been maybe another reason why there was some attention, more attention paid to that case.
Well, and you know what? Let's be honest. Some of the reason can be because she was trans, because she was black,
Oh, we'll talk about
because she
that.
was in a, but she's in a poverty-stricken area. I mean, let's be honest, because these are reasons that some of the stories and people don't get attention.
Well, absolutely. Natalie Wilson with Black and Missing, a Maryland based foundation, worked with the Smith family, and she says police are more likely to classify minority children as runaways rather than victims of crime. And the reverse is true for white children. I mean, just the statistics are there. So there's like there are numbers to back this up. Now, one of the detectives assigned to Sage's case, an officer named Mooney, had previous run-ins with Dean Smith. He was also named in a lawsuit back in 2004 that was filed against the Charlottesville Police Department for assault and battery. As part of a rape investigation in 2003 to 2004, officers stopped black men on the street and showed up at their homes and workplaces demanding cheek swabs. In all, 190 black men were targeted. So, as you can see, the Charlottesville police are problematic. They have a
To say
very
the least.
problematic history.
Oh my gosh.
And there is definitely some racial disparities.
I just don't get
here.
it.
I mean,
At what point are we just going to look at each other like other human beings? That human being needs my help.
I know.
I mean, seriously. And it
I'm
just
like, we're
drives me
all in this
crazy.
together.
We are culturally different. See, and that's part of the issue, I think. We don't want to recognize our cultural differences and say, this is why this group of people reacts this way to this situation and stuff. And that's okay, because that's just how your people have been for hundreds or maybe 1,000 years. And that's okay to be different. But we're not all exactly the same. But my God, those small cultural differences, I just don't understand how you can look at a group of people or a person and say, and just assume because they're another race, like you're going to care less for them or do less of a job for them, whatever your job might be. I don't get that.
I don't either.
Oh my God.
That's one of the things that's very troubling about this case. Another problem with the investigation, the police were dead naming Sage. So on all of the official reports, she was listed as Deshad LaQuinn Smith.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry. I'm such an old codger. I didn't quite know what you meant by that, but I understand using his original name before he came out and decided to transition and picked a new name.
Yes.
That's called dead naming.
Sometimes Sage Smith is added in quotes like a nickname, but they are referring to Sage as a male using pronouns he and him. So the police are not recognizing Sage as a transgender woman. When discussing Eric McFadden as having gay sex, they say alternative lifestyle. So, at minimum, the Charlottesville Police Department could benefit from some diversity or like transgender sensitivity training. Because if they're reporting Sage as a male, I mean, they've got, these photos circulating. And it would be very confusing.
Well, here's the thing.
I mean, it makes it a tricky situation.
What's the reason for a report? So someone else who hasn't been through all this can read the report and get a clear picture of what's happening. And I know some people be like, "Oh my God, I could hear people groaning right now. That doesn't matter. What does that matter?" It does, because someone outside of the investigation, who's maybe going to offer more resources or take the investigation another step, needs to have a clear picture of the situation. And if I read this report the way you're describing it written down, or part of this report, I may assume it's a gay man who's missing. And it's not, right? Because you have Sage is not a gay man, right? She's transitioning. She's going to appear like a female and think this is very important. So, yeah, I mean, I see the importance of having a clear picture in your report, accurate description, and it just doesn't seem to be there.
Well, I thought this was interesting, though. Sage's birth mother agreed with detectives that the best way to help find Sage is by looking for a male.
Okay. Well, maybe she knows something I don't.
Mooney has responded, and that's the detective, to his critics, and he said, quote, "I can tell you my detectives bust their ass on every case they get. The frustrating part is instead of helping us find Sage, people want to argue about gender issues and things like that. I don't think it should matter." And though Mooney did admit in a city like Charlottesville, it's hard to get the community to care. In Hannah Graham's case, people were volunteering to search and spreading the word. With Sage Smith, the community at large wasn't as willing to get involved. So law enforcement has stated they felt animosity and anti-police sentiments from the Smith family. During a candlelight vigil organized at Miss Cookie's house, people were chanting, "Fuck the police."
Well, I mean, I see their point of view to a degree there, of course. And sometimes with some of the cases we've done in the past, and the family really doesn't think the law enforcement is doing the right job or they're messing the investigation up, and they kind of build this wall around the family, or it's like us versus the police. That's not going to create an environment that's going to help this get done any better. So you really do have to be careful with that sometimes, I think, as the victim's family or friends, to not, because police are people too. They have feelings, you know what I mean? And if I really am trying hard as I can, even though in your perception that I'm not, and then you start having this attitude towards me, that's not going to make me try harder, right? Does that make sense?
No, I mean, I
Because
get it.
now I'm like, well, no matter how hard I try, they're just blowing me off. They think I'm a piece of, they think I'm an asshole, and I'm not really trying. So that's just going to quickly shut things down.
Well, detectives admitted there were gender problems and racial issues that have been a hindrance to Sage's case. When officers tried passing out missing persons posters, some of the area businesses refused to cooperate and didn't want to have Sage's poster in their window.
Well, that's what in the beginning we said Sage had so many things working against her in this situation, and there's another example of it. Her own community not being that comfortable with her lifestyle, not embracing it, or not just like, hey, I know that I see that person walking the street every day. I want to help find them. I mean, that's unfortunate. That's not going to help the investigation any either.
No, you're right, Dylan. Okay, so where was I here? You got me all.
I'm sorry, I got y'all with my big words and my
got me all worked up.
My mush mouth thoughts.
Dean Smith believes law enforcement spent too much time focusing on Eric McFadden, and he thinks, now this is an interesting theory, Dylan, that Sage's friends know more than they've said. He has stated he thinks Aubrey Carson had something to do with his daughter's disappearance. Now remember, Aubrey was the friend who was allegedly in bed asleep, didn't wake up till 8 p.m., realized Sage was gone. Initially, when Sage went missing, Dean had gone over to the Dollhouse Mansion, to the apartment. He found most of Sage's wigs were missing, like someone had taken her wigs. One friend was wearing a necklace that belonged to Sage. It was like a locket. And when Dean asked about it, the friend said, "Oh, my boyfriend bought it for me." But he knew good and damn well that was his daughter's necklace.
See, now, I mean, that could just be, that's weird.
Now get this.
That was in those wigs. I'm going to guess these are some high quality and probably rather expensive wigs.
Wigs are expensive.
These are not some garbage wigs.
These are not
that
Party
Sage
City
is not
wigs.
wearing shitty wigs.
No, you get yourself a nice lace front. I mean, you're looking at, anywhere from like $100 to $200.
Right. So these
Or
have
more.
value, and you could say, well, I was expecting a friend say, "Oh, we borrow each other's things," which I'm sure happens. You borrow clothes, you borrow jewelry, but to then say, "Oh, my boyfriend bought this for me," that seems like that's a lie. I mean, that's a lie. That's weird.
On Wednesday, now this is like the kicker with this theory, Dylan, is on Wednesday after Sage went missing, Aubrey Carson was in a gas station using Sage's EBT card.
It's like they've just rifled through her things.
And Dean found this oddly suspicious. Your friend goes missing and you're out using her food stamps and spending her food stamps.
They're going through her things, taking what you want.
Rifling her wardrobe, her wigs. I mean, come on.
No, well,
So those are like very personal items.
that's a bit odd.
There's no way to verify Aubrey's story about being in the apartment until 8 p.m. sleeping. So that kind of adds to Dean's suspicions.
There's no alibi, no true alibi. I was there by myself, is what Aubrey was saying.
Dean thinks jealousy might have been a motive. He said Sage was thriving, living her best life, going to school, working. She had her own apartment, like her friends lived there, but it was Sage's apartment. Sage had big family support, grandma, dad, siblings, biological mom. just real strong support system, and that in the end, Sage really wanted for nothing. That, she may not have had everything she kind of wanted. I mean, as far as like basic needs
But
and whatnot.
she was doing what she wanted for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, she could always turn to her dad, hey, can I borrow some money, whatever. Like, people always had her back as far as like if she really needed something. So when the friends would go out, Sage got all the attention because Sage was this very charismatic, big personality, was like the life of the party, the like queen bee. So he thinks that her friends were just jealous because Sage was rocking it.
Well, I mean, jealousy is the root cause of a lot of issues in our society. That's true. But I mean, are they jealous to the point of I'm just going to kill her? Or could it have been they got in an argument over some dumb shit? All this stuff's been happening around the apartment, and then someone gets hurt bad by accident, or things go way too far, way further than anybody meant, and then now you're left with a situation. So what do you think?
Her best friend Shakira has some other theories. After Jamel Smith made that tweet about being disrespected the night before Sage went missing, he didn't post anything else on social media, on Twitter specifically, for nearly a month. And up until that point, he'd been tweeting every day.
Oh, that's interesting.
In May of 2013, he made transphobic statements online about, quote, hating a man who wants to be a woman.
Okay.
Detectives admit Jamel Smith didn't have an alibi for the night of Sage's disappearance, and he has since left the Charlottesville area, but has never really been a person of interest, and police haven't never questioned him, looked into him.
Now, he was present when they had the whole argument spill out into the street,
Yeah,
and
and like he said
on.
that Sage had damaged his vehicle. He had actually gotten into a physical altercation with Sage.
Okay.
And reported it to police, like she fucked up my car. And
Which
then
the police
is tweeting about being disrespected and making these transphobic statements.
Very interesting. And I'm very surprised, they didn't kind of push that maybe a little harder when they first started investigating.
Well, and I thought of this as well. So Eric McFadden, if his story is true, now he is saying that he left with Sage walking, and some people pulled up, and he just kept walking because he sensed something was bad. Could have been this guy.
Well, it could have been that guy, and that's all the more reason Eric McFadden, if he had ever cared for Sage in the least, should have went directly to police with that information. We could have had a description of those people, maybe a description of a vehicle, and it could have led the investigation in a completely different direction. And I kind of don't fault the investigators for keying on Eric McFadden, given his behavior there, directly after her having gone missing. Not being all that cooperative, openly admitting that you were being blackmailed by the person, and then you go out of town, and you basically won't come back, and it's basically like you're on the run. So, I mean, I would have been like, hey, this might be our guy, right? I mean, who wouldn't think that?
In April of 2016, a new detective who was familiar with working cold cases and homicides took over the Sage Smith case. The case has been reclassified as a homicide now. So with the new classification, Charlottesville police could bring in the FBI if they need extra help. So that is a benefit of reclassifying Sage's case.
Interesting.
For Dean Smith, his daughter was taken away just as they were getting to know each other. He said, quote, I'll never get to truly know my child. It's so heartbreaking.
That's very sad.
Eric McFadden was reported missing in June of 2019, nearly 6.5 years after he was last seen in Charlottesville. Investigators spoke with McFadden's mother in 2019. She had assumed that her son's father filed a missing persons report, and when she found out that no report was filed, she filed one on his behalf. So both McFadden's mother and stepmother believe he is dead.
So when did he go missing? I'm sorry, she assumed his father had filed a report, so she filed a missing report years later.
6.5 years later.
But did he go missing from New York there during this time?
In May of 2013 is the last correspondence he had with his girlfriend, Esther Ayani, explaining that, he was planning to run.
Right.
Right. So
Eh.
that is the last time anyone has had contact with him,
Okay.
including his family.
Well, that's odd.
And like I said, his mom and stepmother believe he's dead. Now, some think he may be in Baltimore, Joppa, Maryland. He could be in Lake City, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Rochester, New York City, or perhaps on the West Coast, because he has, I guess, contacts or, knows folks in those specific areas. But there's been no active use of his bank account, social security cards, registering a vehicle.
He could be in Kathmandu.
Just nothing.
But he's not in any of these places.
Well, this is a guy who worked full-time at a Sherwin-Williams store. I mean, he was actively employed up until this point.
He's never reached out to friends or family. He has not accessed his social security card, existing bank accounts. These are not good signs.
No,
These are signs that someone is dead.
His case remains unsolved as well. It's just very suspicious. If anyone has information about the disappearance of Sage Smith or Eric McFadden, you may contact the Charlottesville Police Department. Their number is 434-970-3280. But Dylan, since it is Black History Month, I thought Sage's case was critical and that we should discuss a little bit of trans history because it is an important part of Black history. So in the 1880s, William Dorsey Swan became the first activist to lead a queer resistance group and dub himself Queen of Drag. Hence, that's where we get the name drag queen.
Really?
Swan was a Black man who had been a slave. He lived through the Civil War and the racist aftermath, but then decided to get this resistance group up and became an activist.
That's a great name, too.
William Dorsey Swan.
Yeah.
That's a good name, right? Musician Sylvester, known to many as the Queen of Disco, was a gay Black man who found shelter among the Black drag queens and trans women. Sylvester was known for bold, gender nonconforming fashion. He was also known for his representation of the Black queer experience. Black LGBTQ people made contributions to gain LGBTQ rights in America. The first Pride was the celebration of the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall riots in New York City, which was a catalyst for the civil rights movement across the LGBTQ community. Activist Marsha P. Johnson, who was a self-identified drag queen, advocated for the trans community, the homeless, sex workers, and people living with HIV and AIDS, as well as incarcerated people. And she led the protests and riots following the raid on Stonewall Inn, which was a bar in Greenwich Village. If you're not familiar with the Stonewall riots, you should check that out. This is a really important piece of history. So queer folks of color have interesting intersecting identities that make their experiences deeply meaningful for the entire community. So I felt, Sage's story was also important. And though we've come a long way as a society, baby, we still have a lot of work that needs to be done. Black trans women have been described as a pandemic within a pandemic. In the summer of 2020, 6 Black trans women were murdered in the span of 9 days.
My God.
Hate crimes against transgender or gender nonconforming people has been on the rise for years. Kareth Conron with the Williams Institute at UCLA says the easiest answer to why is, quote, they're Black, they're transgender, and they're women. Each of those distinct identities means that they face discrimination, prejudice, and inequities from multiple fronts. In short, being a Black trans woman in America means a person is far more likely to experience serious roadblocks and, extreme poverty, up to violent murder.
That's so scary.
State laws often leave Black trans women vulnerable. Only 28 states have hate crime laws that don't include protections for trans people. So 28 out of 50 states don't include trans people in their hate bill law or their hate crime laws.
Why? That doesn't make sense.
Several states also recognize the trans panic defense claiming that the perpetrators of violence were driven to the point by the news that a person was trans.
States recognize that as a defense if you were to harm a trans person.
Yes.
No
Several
shit.
states will allow that as a defense.
Now, I must say, I don't agree. I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I would never kill anyone, and I don't even think I would try to beat someone up. I don't know how I would react. That's a very hairy situation. Would you agree? If you've been having intimate contact with someone, you've been talking to them for, let's say, a few days or a week, and they think you are born a woman, right? And then it turns out that you're not. You're a trans person, a trans woman. You were born male, quote unquote. And now they have had intimate contact and be whatever, use your imagination. And now they're flipping out. Now they're losing their shit because they've done stuff with a guy when they would never, ever do anything with a guy because they identify as hetero and they like women. What that is that's a bad situation. Would you agree?
Well, I think it's a really tricky defense.
I don't think that's not excusing someone like I mean, I would be pissed personally, but I don't think I would kill anyone. Do you?
Well, no, I don't think that is a good defense. I don't think that you can say that is going to trigger you to murder someone. I mean, to me, that is not a good excuse. And I find it just to be a very tricky situation because, I'm not going to speak for, being trans, but I do have quite a few friends who are trans, and they have shared with me their experience in that, sometimes, of course, being upfront and honest is best, but, it is a very private, personal choice.
And that's their choice.
And some folks aren't quite out, like, with their families and different things. And so just sharing that information with someone kind of at Jump Street, you first meet someone, that is a pretty personal thing to share with somebody, like, right away. And that, it is their decision on when they decide to share that with a person. So, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
I appreciate what they're describing there.
But I think it's a BS defense.
But I think that's before, I can tell you where it should be, and this might save a lot of trouble, is just before you end up in a situation where it doesn't mean anyone deserves anything, you just got to look out for yourself. You got to do what's right and what's best for you and what's safest for you. And that's in all situations in life. And just some people are freaking morons, and you just don't want to get caught up in their bullshit, right?
Yeah, I totally think it's a BS defense.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the resources I used today, lots of news articles. There are many news articles that cover SAGE. One of the most useful was written by Emma Eisenberg and was published at splinternews.com. It had a lot of personal information, quotes from her family, so it was a really useful article. This is just a really sad case, and I always check because I've learned about this case a while ago, and I've had it on our list, Dylan, and I've kind of gone back periodically to see updates, if there's any, new news or anything like that. Unfortunately, Sage is still missing, but let's hope that by spreading awareness and keeping Sage's name out there and this case in the forefront of people's minds, and especially our true crime fans, we got a lot of web sleuths and such, maybe one day her family will finally get some justice and we'll know what happened to Sage.
Yeah, and that's all that any family or anyone could hope for. A family is to just get some answers, some type of closure, and God forbid, to recover her remains and properly bury her, whatever they view that as.
Well, you have been listening to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather. That's Dylan. If you want to drop us a line, mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com is a great way to send in your maybe case suggestions. We always take listener stories, and, we just like hearing from you.
You drop a line, we'll tug on it.
You can also follow us at patreon.com/mountainmurderspodcast. If you want to support the show, you can sign up. We have different levels of sponsorship, and that helps us keep this show on the road, Dylan. We also have our podcast, Batshit Crazy. That pops off on Thursdays. So make sure you search for Batshit Crazy wherever you get our podcasts and listen to that. It's kind of an extension of our former Midweek Offbeat series where we cover everything strange and unusual. We love good conspiracy theories. We've got quite a few of those coming up in the coming weeks. So if you're someone who's got that kind of brain, wants to learn about the reptilians in charge, give us a listen.
They're there. And you can join us Wednesday for our Offbeat episode, which is going to be breaking news and anything true crime.
All right, Dylan, you have a great week, folks.
Bye.